Good evening and welcome. I am Amarachi Ubani. Tonight, experts converge on Abuja to discuss Nigeria's unity and the need for restructuring amidst recent tension witnessed in some parts of the country. Minister for Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, condemns promoters of hate speeches and says there is no love lost between the acting president and the cabinet. Former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair says elected officials must be accountable to the people before democracy can succeed. And the United States President Donald Trump is in France to hold talks with his French counterparts, discussing ways of tackling the terrorist group ISIS.
On Business News tonight, federal government to support ease of doing business for micro, small and medium enterprises to thrive.
And on sports news, Venus Williams becomes the oldest Grand Slam singles finalist since Martina Navratilova in 1994 after beating home favorite Johanna Konta to reach the Wimbledon final.
And from Abuja, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, maintains status quo as ordered by the courts, suspends the recall process of Senator Dino Milai.
We begin tonight with conversations about national unity and restructuring, which have dominated the political landscape in recent months, with little or no consensus emerging around the issue. In an attempt to forge common goals and perspectives, socio-political experts say that while viewpoints may differ, Nigerians on either side of the debate remain on the same page as it relates to national unity. A panel of discussants led by Professor Ibrahim Gambari held a dialogue on prospects and challenges of national restructuring in Abuja. Our correspondent, Ajuri Inglali, reports.
Restructuring is not new and has been around for decades.
Talk of restructuring is not new, but the enhanced volatility around the conversation is. Gathering here is a panel aiming to bring civility to the debate.
It has to be continuous conversation of Nigeria, and the government cannot be the one to take the lead all the time. This country belongs to all of us, and we all have a duty to protect what we believe is valuable, which is the Nigerian project.
Is the limited access to state resources by political elites in recent times fueling the hostile nature of agitation in the country? One panelist says citizens take a cue from somewhere.
Those who talk about the politicization of ethnicity refer to this dimension, but without going back to the reality, because in the end, we get the impression that poor people are just doing bad things. The reality of the situation is that it is actually politicians who are doing bad things and ordinary people forced to redefine their identity.
Other panelists assert that leaders of today can learn from history to further perfect the Nigerian Union.
In 18 years of civil rule, we have engaged in unending exercises of constitutional review. Unfortunately, these efforts have not led to the kind of bold steps taken in the 1970s, soon after the Civil War, through programs such as the NYC, Unity Schools, Federal Character, and a host of other genuine attempts to pursue integration. Today, most of these attempts, which represented a marked departure from the past, are being reversed even as we watch and seek answers to the problem of reintegration.
We spend a lot of time in seminars and workshops, the remaining period in prayers, and at the end nothing works.
The time alignment between hostile agitation and Nigeria's electoral calendar may raise suspicion, but the core issues of restructuring were on this day engaged with a patriotic zeal for progress. Ajuri Ngilale, Channels Television News.
The coalition of northern groups issued a quit notice to Igbos on the 6th of June 2017 to vacate the north, are asking the United Nations to intervene in the secessionist moves by the indigenous people of Biafra by initiating processes for a peaceful referendum to resolve the Biafran issue. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, spokesperson for the group, Mr. Abdulaziz Sulaiman, is also asking the United Nations to pronounce Nnamdi Kanu and the indigenous people of Biafra as a terror group. prescribing their activities and initiating criminal actions against them.
As law-abiding citizens, we wrote officially to the United Nations and urged its urgent intervention in the following two key areas. One, that the UN invokes the relevant statutes to which Nigeria is a signatory to pronounce KANU and IPOB as terror outfits, proscribe their activities, and initiate criminal actions against them. Two, since it is becoming all the more obvious by the way IPOB and KANU enjoy massive support from the Igbo back home, that the issue of the drive for Biafra nation is still a boiling matter, we urged the UN to intervene by initiating processes for a peaceful referendum as the only option to finally settle the Biafran issue.
We believe strongly that there is no major or any strong institution that is as strong as a government. The government must be seen to be updoing. Nobody will be allowed to hold our country to ransom. We are determined, we are proudly Nigerians. That somebody decide, a group of people or few individuals decide that they want to go out of the country, there's something wrong in helping them, asking them to please. In fact, we are even proceeding, going further to even internationalize the agitations for them to find an easy exit way to go.
The acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has called on Nigerians to rise against calls for secession and support the unity of the nation, as anything short of this will lead to anarchy. Speaking at an event in Osun State, Professor Osinbajo says all cultures in the country must put their differences aside and pull together to protect the nation from disintegrating.
I want to urge every Nigerian to continue to support the ideals that we stand for. The ideals of unity across this country, and we have put our money where our mouth is when it comes to unity. And I want to encourage each and every one of us. There can be no division in Nigeria, no division, no separation. This country is great because all of us are here. Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, Ijaw, every one of us, faith, Ibibio, every one of us, all of us make this country great.
In the meantime, the media has been asked to be responsible in its reportage about events happening in the country. And that's coming from the Minister of Information and Culture, Mr. Lai Mohammed. He was speaking at an event organized by the Aviation Roundtable in Lagos.
Most of the people who consume these hate speeches don't know much better. Otherwise, they will know that there's absolutely no truth what is being circulated. There's nothing, there's no division between the acting president and the cabinet. There's no division between the acting president and Mr. President. All these talks about the division, I think it's just, a fiction of the imagination. But they have a purpose. It's to weaken this government, is to ensure that we are distracted. And I'm happy that we as a government, we are resolved that this is a very trying time for Nigeria, and we must all put in our best to ensure that this country remains one.
So a totally different development. The former British minister, Prime Minister that is, Tony Blair, has pledged support for political leaders in the country to deliver good governance to the people. Mr. Blair made the pledge when he visited the Kaduna State Governor, Nasir El-Rufai, at Government House, Kaduna. He says his foundation, the Tony Blair Foundation, will assist Kaduna State in the area of technical assistance and other support to enable it deliver on campaign promises.
The former British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, arrives at the Government House, Kaduna, for a one-day visit. He meets with members of the Kaduna State Executive Council at the Governor's office.
We are grateful to you and your institute for the support you've given the state so far in strengthening our resource delivery unit. Your presence here is an indication of your commitment to do more, and we need more.
In his remarks, Mr. Blair commends his country's close relationship with Nigeria.
After I left Downing Street, I decided to set up the governance initiative in order that I help people in positions of leadership ascend the learning curve faster because they can profit from my my errors as well as my successes, and also because I feel an enormous sympathy for those that are in the positions of leadership.
Mr. Tony Blair says there is great goodwill and desire for the country to do well.
If Kaduna State succeeds, Nigeria is in better shape. If Nigeria is in better shape, then the whole of Africa also succeeds. So our reasons for coming are because there is a leader with vision and with a program that we would like to help and support. And the work my institute does around Africa is really to help governments deliver on their priority.
For Governor El Rufai, the visit of the former British Prime Minister is timely.
Prime Minister Tony Blair's government was one of the best government, most efficient governments in the history of the United Kingdom. We want to learn from them, and we are happy that he has agreed to give the institutional support and all the technical expertise available to him, as well as his global network, to help Kaduna State.
As Mr. Tony Blair departs Nigeria back to the UK, he takes away from the visit that elected officials need to do more to strengthen their governance institutions in order to deliver their campaign promises to the people.
Nigerians may soon get reprieve from the long years of frustration from epileptic power supply in the country. That's coming from the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, during the 5th public lecture of the Department of Economics at the University of Lagos. Mr. Fashola also reveals the Mambila Power Project, which is expected to generate additional 3,500 megawatts, will take off before the end of this year.
Determined to get to the root of the perennial problem of the power sector that appears to have been jinxed for almost half a century.
So much importance to this program.
The Department of Economics of the University of Lagos rose to its 5th annual public lecture with the theme, The Power Sector Reforms in Nigeria, Challenges and the Way Forward. Perhaps to activate the minds of the audience on the issue at stake, the Pro-Chancellor of the University of Lagos also takes an overview of the fundamental challenge confronting the nation.
It is only through very serious cerebral application to very little resources that we can have enough money to transform the educational sector.
Now time to hear from the man in the eye of the storm on the hydra-headed problem and the nagging afflictions of the power sector. The Minister of Power, Works and Housing explains that the challenge of the sector stems from several decades of broken promises by successive administrations.
But there was a lot of work to be done. Metering is now haunting us. Audit of customers. How many people are you going to supply as a distributor of a product? If you don't know your customer base, you are going to run into trouble. And later this year, we will start the construction of the Mambila hydropower plant for 3,050 megawatts.
Reviewing the minister's speech, the guest speaker advocates harnessing the resources needed for power supply in the country, while calling on all stakeholders in the power supply chain to be accountable.
In some countries, energy use are electionally used. And so during the election time, you can then talk with your vote as to whether the government, whether the state or federal or local, are accountable.
Out of the talking points, the big question on the minds of the audience is, when will Nigerians ever get to enjoy uninterrupted power supply? No doubt this would be a major scorecard for the current administration.